To lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune, but to lose both parents, now that's just carelessness. Oscar Wilde in The Importance of Being Earnest. Now, the first thing any crowd or any audience receiving this message would say, or the first thing that would come to mind, is that whoever is giving the speech at this wake needs to take a seat because that was uncalled for. Now, if we were to rewind a little, let's go back and try that again without the sarcastic tone. Here goes. To lose one parent may be regarded as a mournful experience. To lose both is just sad, just as sad. You'll notice that while the second statement went straight to the point and didn't change the emotions of the audience in the room, this first statement did bring on humor and it did lighten the mood, and while they might not know it at the moment, did make them a little bit less sad about this current situation they're in at this supposed wake. That is something we like to call in classical literature the use of invectives. And these invectives are used to allow one personage to insult another using abusive tone or language, or even just invoke humor during such dire situations. You see this a lot in works such as Shakespeare, like I said, Oscar Wilde, and so forth. These terms were mainly used in works of the previous eras, the typical classical literature we read in schools. Now, the problem with that is that today, educators would like to have these types of works taken out completely of the school systems so that in the near future, it's also taken out of our vocabulary, as they believe it would reduce bullying and so on and so forth. But what we sometimes forget is that the use of invectives promotes using intellectual insults and not the typical hurtful ones that are mainly used in not only schools but in everyday life. And taking it out would not do us much good, except for the fact that it would take away such great works from the human the future races. Now, a world without such a world of antique literature without this aesthetic language and tone would definitely leave us with the only thing we're really known for nowadays, the cliches, and all we can do is hope for that is enough to intellectually stimulate us the way that typical classical literature does. Because, believe it or not, every piece of classical literature has invectives. Let's take, for instance, Twilight. During the whole series, I'm not saying anything bad about the story, but throughout the whole series, I can promise you that Twilight had nothing on the toxicity of Romeo and Juliet. They killed each other in the name of love, for God's sake. Even in between that, I promise you will need a dictionary to read this book, because the insults, the jokes, everything is on a higher level of thinking. The words are made up, and you have to think especially hard in order to understand the message the author is trying to put through. It's not the typical "I love you, you love me." It's I'll pretend to kill myself, and you pretend to kill yourself, and maybe we end up dying in reality. But who knows? In the name of love. It requires more in-depth thinking than the typical love stories of today, and that goes for all classical literature versus all the typical literature we use today. Because of the reason for having these pieces in our literature today is because they make a way for us to coexist between serious and playful relationships. Just like the wake, you're able to understand that, okay, something serious did happen, but it's gonna be okay. Dipped in laughter and scolded with curses. Today, even, everyday life, especially with the protests going on around us, we use invectives every day. And even if it was taken away from schools, we would still have it in our everyday language, but it would be weak. Take, for instance, this piece of political cartoon. It has Trump saying, "Thanks for the support. I condemn you and your many sides, many sides." And the devil shaking his hand saying, "Many sides, yes." Hitler is also shaking his sides saying, "Us too." And the KKK is also shaking his hand saying, "Many sides." And that goes to show that not only are invectives used to make fun of the situation, but they're also showing how serious the situation is. As in, him coming into the presidency has brought on so much hate and the wrong type of freedom in our community, and it's shining a light on that, but in a funny way. That's an invective.